Breaking news, this tragedy struck last night in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill as 2 Israeli diplomats were murdered in cold blood outside of an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum. The man in the situation is a Christian, a believer. They had planned to get married. These are young people in their 20s and 30s. And it's an unfortunate situation to happen, but of course it's happening because of the rise of not only anti-Israel, but anti-Semitic rhetoric that is happening throughout this country right now. You know, I wouldn't have been surprised to wake up and hear this happen on the streets of Tel Aviv, and I guess that's sad, or hear it happen on the streets of Jerusalem, or even in some other countries. But now it is on our doorstep. Our office is blocks from there in Washington, D.C. This was a targeted murdering of 2 people just because of not only the government they work for, but because of their beliefs and their background, because of their cultural ethnicity. And you could come up with a lot of different reasons. I heard some really horrible versions of this will go, well, it's not about the fact that they're Jewish. It has to do with, they're working for a government. I was like, why are we justifying murder ever? I don't believe you should be able to walk the streets of America with any religion, with any background, with any creed, without anything, and not have to be worried about being murdered because of maybe who your boss is or because of where your family came from. But this is what's happening. So if we start justifying any of this, then we gotta stop. Now, President Trump has responded. So has Pam Bondi. President Trump's was in text. He put, these horrible DC killings based obviously on anti-Semitism must end now. Hatred and radicalism have no place in the U.S. Condolences to the families of the victims. So sad that such things can happen. God bless you all. So a very simple, poignant statement from President Trump.
Spoke to the President of the United States multiple times tonight on behalf of the President. His prayers are with all of us, all of the Jewish community, everyone in Washington, D.C., state, local, and federal agencies, and our great U.S. Attorney, Jeanine Pirro, who will be prosecuting this case, will be doing everything in our power to keep all citizens safe, especially tonight our Jewish community. Our prayers go out. We have the FBI. All of our federal agencies will work hand in hand with you, Chief, as we have done, and you, Mayor, to do everything we can to keep our citizens safe. We will follow the facts. We will follow the law. And this defendant, if charged, will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
I hate this is happening in America. And, we've been talking about here at the ACLJ for a long time, our support of Israel. There's a reason why. But we got to call it out. You got to call it out. You got to be a part of stopping what's going on. If you really believe in sort of an anti-violent message, it can never be justified. It can never be claimed just because of someone's background in the streets of America.
I just came back from D.C. Last night, and I was asked if I wanted to show up at that event, but there are a lot of events now because it's Jewish Heritage Month, so a lot of events in D.C., but I really needed to get back to New York, so I left last night, and then, like you, I saw it in the news. My reaction globally about this is the contextualization of this, whether it's the murderer himself, and apparently there's a manifesto, or it's the media that have been doing this from the beginning, or it's the terrorists who perpetrated October 7th, the atrocities against the Jews, and then try to cast themselves as victims. That's what always happens. There's for 2,000 years, there were many corners of the world in which Jews were being killed and Jewish life was cheap. And the argument that, well, Jews killed Jesus. So it's not only okay, but it's somehow morally good that every Jew who ever exists, who lives anywhere in the world, is appropriately held accountable and appropriately targeted as a victim. And that's what, in this generation, is the entire notion of the Palestinian. They say Jesus was a Palestinian. Obviously, it's absurd. Jesus existed well before the concept of Palestinian was ever created. But it is true in the reverse, which is, it seems to be that Palestinians are all Jesus. And somehow every Jew in the world, everywhere, their lives are cheap. Their lives are acceptable and understandable when they're killed. And this idea is, it's not only that it's sick and disturbing, it's the same idea that destroyed civilization after civilization around the world. This idea that we want to find someone to hate and blame, let's pick on the Jews. Let's find some way to make them the eternal outsider, some way to blame them for everything. And so every Jew becomes a victim, but it does damage not to the Jews as well, but it does damage to the society that does it. And the fact that this is now here in America and that this has become normalized by politicians, by the press and media, and it's taken up on college campuses, et cetera, this is the result. Murder.
A clip from one of the leaders of Hamas. One of the leaders of Hamas went on a podcast and talked about, you know what he loved? He loves seeing what's happening on those college campuses in America.
Who could have imagined that students in America at universities from which the politicians graduate would protest against their leaders and against Zionist occupation and say that Palestine must be liberated from the river to the sea? Not just the 1967 borders, like most of our Arab leaders say.
They oppose the Zionist enterprise in its entirety.
Right, this is a dream come true. Today, the number of Muslims is multiplying because of what is happening in Gaza. Today, Gaza is giving a new interpretation to the Holy Quran. People used to read the verses, but perhaps did not understand what they meant. Now, when they see what is happening in Gaza, they understand the meaning of many of these verses because of many details that are evident every day in Gaza. So, what is happening in Gaza is not about 100 destroyed houses or 1,000 martyrs. The story is much bigger. Gaza today has taught a lesson not just to the occupation, but to the Islamic nation and the world. The implications, fruits, and outcome are extensive. We will rebuild the houses and will produce dozens more babies for each martyr. They are the price we need to pay.
I hope if anything positive could come out of this horrible, horrible tragedy, is for those who are maybe in the conservative side, and those who are on the liberal side can now finally open their eyes and see that the violence is happening here on the streets, and the violence has to stop, by the way. And it doesn't matter if you're a Christian, if you're a Jew, if you're a Muslim. It doesn't matter your ethnic background. You should be able to walk the streets of America and feel safe. One of our founding principles, maybe the first founding principle of the country. And there is no justification for murder.
By the way, a meeting I had on Tuesday in Washington, one of the reasons I was there was with a senator who's on the Homeland Security Committee and was asking me about what we thought at ACLJ, what I thought going back and forth into Israel in terms of America's Homeland Security. And this is what we talked about. I said there's not enough of an awareness here. Israel, there's an awareness because of the nature of where Israel exists and its own history. But in the United States of America, there's not enough of awareness of what the threat is to our citizens here on our homeland. And the next day, this happens, not just in our homeland, but in Washington, D.C., very nearby where I had that meeting with that senator talking about exactly this problem. We, in this country, need to be vigilant. We need to not only understand what the threat and the problem is in terms of narrative, but that we have to, our law enforcement, we must understand that this threat is real and viable. And as you say, Logan, it is not just coming from one part of the political spectrum. It is growing more and more across the spectrum, and it endangers all of us as individuals and our society as a whole.